Hi, Aston Shanto. It's great to meet you. You're currently a business analyst with about 3.5 years of experience, and I'd love to hear more in your own words. Could you please introduce yourself and share a bit about your background and what you're focused on right now?
Hi, my name is Aston. I would like to start off with my undergraduate degree. So I did my undergraduate in electrical and electronics engineering. Post that, I worked as a network engineer for 1.5 years. Then I got into continue my career with my postgraduate degree, where I did a dual masters, and one was an MBA, which is in lean operations and system, and I also did my second part of the dual masters as masters in information system. Post that, started working as a data analyst for almost 2.5 years. Then I switched and started to work as a business analyst, and it's been 3.5 years since I've started working as a business analyst. So that would be some of my career growth. And with respect to the projects that I've been handling as part of working as a business analyst, was I did. So I'm part of an implementation team, and I do handle multiple clients, which includes work and responsibilities like creating the implementation project plan and acquiring the business requirement documents and functional requirement documents, and also to do the integrations and to handle the project, being the project manager for the project. So these are some of the roles and responsibilities that I've been part of.
What is your current role or designation?
So my current role is business analyst.
Thanks for sharing. Let's move on. How many years of total work experience do you have?
So cumulatively, I have a total work experience of 7.5 years.
Thanks for sharing. Let's move on. What is your highest qualification?
My highest qualification would be Masters in Information System, and it's also a dual master's degree, right? So it's MBA in Lean Operations and MS or Masters in Information System.
Are you ready to proceed with the technical questions? If you are, say yes. If not, say no.
Yes, I am.
A stakeholder says, make the report easier to use. What would you ask to turn that into a testable requirement?
Right. So when a stakeholder asks me to I mean, asks me like make the report easier to use, I would assume, oh, like there requires a lot of understanding on make it easier, right? So I wouldn't assume what they mean by easier. Instead, I would ask them some set of questions to understand what is easier or what does easier mean. So I would ask some of the questions such as who uses this report, what tasks are difficult or time consuming today, which section of it is to be made easier onto, or what are the valuable outputs that we are expecting out of this make easy terminology, and what users or what are the struggles that the users are having in terms of like finding information, or is the report taking too long to be load, some of the examples I mean, and how would you measure success factor of once we make it easier? What are the measures or metrics is that we need to evaluate by getting the output of a report being easier? So after gathering all these informations, I would convert these feedbacks into clear and measurable requirements. Like for example, instead of documenting, make the report easier to use. Or I would say specific requirements like add filters for the department data or date or PII information, or display summary KPIs at the top where it's easier for the reports to read instead of directly going and looking at each columns and rows, or reduce report generation time to understand if it's done in like 5 seconds, 10 seconds, or as per the requirement. So these are some of the objective requirements that developers can implement or test, right? On of course on the UAT environment or the user acceptance testing environment first, and then move on to the production. So that's how I would be taking it.
Thanks for sharing. Let's move on. In a current workflow, what is a good sign that a step may be a bottleneck?
So would be some steps to make a bottleneck. Right. Right. So a bottleneck is usually a step where the work accumulates because it cannot be processed as quickly as it should be. Or right. So one of the strongest indicators is when tasks consistently spend more time. Right. So let's say if a task requires like 5 minutes or 10 minutes time, and it's taking more than that, let's say 20, 30, which is like double the time that it actually requires, right? So the other signs would be like, let's say in terms of integration, when the data comes in, it's increasing the queue size. The data is not getting processed as per how the data usually used to get processed, right? Or maybe some manual process which requires approval is taking a lot of time due to high error rates. So these are some of the bottlenecks where it also might include multiple teams, right? Multiple members to like get the work done with. So to confirm that a bottleneck exists, these are some of the things that I would be looking at. I would create some metrics such as turnaround time, process time, queue length, as I mentioned about the integration case, right? So I would also speak with the teams who are performing these processes to understand what are the operational challenges that they might be having during those processes. So these are the ways how I would understand what are the problems. And once we understand what are the root causes, we need a root cause analysis, right? So I would evaluate improvements such as simplification of processes, the processes that are humanly done, and the repetitive task, or redistribution of the workload, or redesigning the process that needs an overall improvement in the efficiency or the efficacy of the project, right? So that's how I would be taking it.
Thanks for sharing. Let's move on. When a request is vague, what is one simple way to find the missing edge cases before design starts?
Okay, right. So whenever I receive a vague requirement, or one of the simplest and most good technique or effective technique, I could say, is to use scenario based questioning, right? Instead of discussing only the normal flow, I ask stakeholders what happened if the question is to uncover like situations where it might not be actually considered, right? So some questions would be like, what happened, or what happens if mandatory information is missing? Like, let's say there could be let's say take a scenario where we have a set of columns and rows, where we have column 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, like 5 columns, where 2 columns or 3 columns of the data are mandatory for the process to happen. Rest of them might be optional, which might not require necessarily. So that would be one question. The other one would be what happens if the same record is repeated twice, the duplication basically. Or what happens if the user doesn't have permissions to access some of the data or some of the sheet or some of the process it per se. And what happens if the external API, let's take in a case of integration, an external API is unavailable. It's very important, right? The inbounds and the outbounds, both systems should be having their talking. So those would be some of the questions. The other ones would be what happens if the process is interrupted halfway. Let's say due to integration itself, we had a scenario of internal server error where the data was not received at the receiving end. What would be the next steps that needs to be taken, or how does it impact, right? So these discussions are often required, I would say, for the business rules and validations or requirements. Also, the exception handling that needs to be taken care of, right? So identifying these edge cases before the design itself would actually help us reduce the development changes that is required, right? So we make some developments and then we needed to make new changes to it where an additional development is required and an additional deployment is also required, which takes unnecessary time and duration for the project to be completed, right? So these are some things that could be taken care of if we have a well set plan and a well set document how we need to implement the project.
Thanks for sharing. Let's move on. Two managers want opposite things for the same process. How would you handle the conflict early?
So I would say if there is such kind of a conflict, I would first go and meet each manager individually, try to understand the reasoning behind, because it's already a conflict, right? One might say A, the other one might say B. So the requirement conflicts. So I would try to understand that, try to understand the reasoning behind that business problem, why they give such a solution or a solution A or a solution B, or the conflict that is happening. Both perspectives, let's say, often both perspective used to be valid, right? Everyone wants to make it perfect. So the focus would be on the priorities. Let's say should we prioritize B over A or A over B, or let's say we have some certain set of requirements, one, two, three, four, and how should we prioritize that those one, two, three, four? Like both the manager would have their own way of prioritizing things, right? So the next thing that I would do is to try to bring the stakeholders together, review the current process, the business goal, what we want to achieve at the end point, right? So existing documentations and the impact of each proposed approach is also required, right? So I would discuss the advantages, the risk, the do's and don'ts, the downstream, the upstream of each options, and so that we have a brainstorming and collectively come into a decision where how we need to set the priorities, right? So if the conflict still cannot be resolved, I would escalate the decision to the business owner or the product owner, I would say, who has the authority to make the final business decision, right? So once the decision is made, I would update the requirements accordingly and stick on to that plan and move forward as a team.
Thanks for sharing. Let's move on. What is one manual step in a process that is often worth automating first?
Right. So automating a step. So we know there are a lot of manual processes that could happen in a workspace or in a process, right? So my first look onto automation would be how many of those manual work are repetitive. Like let's say we are doing it on a daily basis or a weekly basis. So these can be automated, right? We can use like rule-based tasks and consume significant time that consume significant time for the process to be done. The next would be the tact of each process. Like when we do a process manually, how much time it takes, how many time, or how can we reduce the tact while automating such processes. So automating this step could through a system integration, or like let's say APIs, can significantly improve the efficiency, right? Ultimately we are reducing the time or the TAT, right? So, and also it reduces the manual effort, improve data accuracy, because human tends to make errors, right? And allow employees to focus more valuable time on the judgment, right? it would always be good that we take the decisions rather than giving the power of the decisions to be taken by a AI or a machine or a system, right? So that's how I would take such a process.
Thank you, Aston, for your time and insights. We'll now move to the coding section.